Okay, so picture this. You're scrolling through social media and you see a story about like a cultural practice that just seems, I don't know, totally wrong to you. Like maybe it's a tradition you find unjust or a belief system that just clashes with like everything you believe in. And it leaves you thinking, like, how can people possibly think that's okay?
Right.
Well, today's deep dive is going to tackle that very question.
Oh, wow.
We're going to explore this age-old debate. Are there like universal moral principles that bind us all? Or is morality just totally like made up by the culture we grow up in?
It's a question for the ages, isn't it? Because it really makes you think about your own moral compass, right?
Certainly.
And whether there's like this deeper shared understanding of right and wrong.
Yeah.
One that like cuts across all those cultural differences.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we've got research from anthropologists, psychologists, even people using like computational analysis. It's like we've assembled this dream team of experts to help us crack the code of, human morality. So by the end, you'll understand what these potential universal ethics might be and why this matters like so much in our increasingly interconnected world.
Yeah, because like it or not, we're all connected.
Right.
And to really understand each other, I think we need to understand this stuff.
Totally. Okay, so our main source for this deep dive is a book called, get this, Scientists Discover Surprising Truth About Universal Ethics.
A bold claim.
Right. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So let's start with the anthropologists.
Okay.
They've spent like decades, right, studying all these different cultures around the world. And what they found is pretty wild.
Yeah, anthropology is so cool because it really shows you like the incredible range of human behavior.
Yeah.
But one of the most important things they've found is this idea of human universals.
Human universals.
Yeah, like there's this anthropologist, Donald Brown.
Yeah.
And he like meticulously documented all these behaviors and practices that you find in every single human culture. Every one.
Whoa, wait. So you're saying there are things that like literally every culture on Earth has in common? Like what? Give me an example.
Well, like prohibitions against murder, theft, and lying.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, obviously the specific definitions and punishments, those vary from culture to culture. But the like underlying principle, that's pretty much the same everywhere you go. Like you don't kill people, you don't steal, you don't lie. These actions are like universally understood as harmful.
Interesting. Because they damage trust, right?
Exactly. They damage social trust and cooperation, which are like essential for any society to function.
That makes a lot of sense. So even if like the details are different, the core idea is that certain behaviors are just bad for society.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It suggests that even with all our differences, right, there are these shared moral intuitions that guide how we interact with each other.
Okay, that's fascinating. But what about like all those values and customs that seem totally different across cultures?
Right.
Like attitudes towards, I don't know, marriage or food or personal space. Like how do those fit into this whole universal ethics thing?
Well, that's where cultural universals come in.
Cultural universals, so not human universal.
Right. It's a little different. This idea says that like underneath all the surface level stuff, the obvious cultural variations, there are these deeper values that all humans share.
Okay, so it's like we've all got the same basic values, but we just express them in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Like every culture values respect for elders. But how they show that respect, that can be totally different.
Oh, I see.
Like in some cultures, it's all about formal titles and deference, while in others, it might be through storytelling or sharing wisdom.
It's like having the same software, but running on different hardware.
A perfect analogy. Okay, so now that we've like dipped our toes into anthropology,
right?
Let's see what the psychologists have to say about all this morality stuff. Have you ever heard of moral foundations theory?
It rings a bell, something to do with like the basic building blocks of morality.
You got it. These psychologists, Jonathan Haidt and Jesse Graham, they came up with this theory.
Okay.
And it says that human morality is built on these like 5, maybe 6 innate foundations. And they're present in every culture.
Interesting. What are they?
Okay, so there's care harm, fairness cheating, loyalty betrayal, authority subversion, sanctity degradation.
Okay.
And then some people add liberty oppression.
So you're saying these are like what moral instincts we're born with?
You could say that. And the interesting thing is that while these foundations are like universal, they're everywhere, the emphasis on each one can be totally different depending on the culture.
Oh, so like some cultures prioritize fairness above all else, while others, it's more about loyalty?
Yeah, exactly. And the research suggests that Western individualistic cultures, they tend to prioritize fairness and care,
Okay.
while more collectivist societies, they put more emphasis on loyalty, authority, and sanctity. But here's the takeaway, right?
Yeah.
Knowing about these foundations can help us understand why people from different cultures might react so differently to the same moral dilemma.
Oh, I
So
see.
it's not necessarily about, like, who's right and who's wrong, but about which moral buttons are being pushed.
That's a good way to put it. It's like a decoder ring
Yeah.
for understanding moral perspectives across cultures.
Exactly. And what's even cooler is that there's evidence suggesting these moral foundations are there, like even in young children.
Really? You mean it's not just cultural conditioning?
Right. Studies show that, like, toddlers, even babies, they show an early understanding of things like fairness and helping.
Wow.
They seem to instinctively prefer characters who are helpful, and they react negatively to ones who are unfair,
Wow.
even before they're, like, fully socialized.
That's pretty amazing. It's like some aspects of morality are just hardwired.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, then how do we explain all those classic, like, philosophical thought experiments?
Oh, yeah.
You know, the ones that always spark these huge debates. Like the trolley problem.
Oh, yeah. The trolley problem, a real brain twister.
Right. Let a runaway trolley kill 5 people, or,
Right.
Intervene and divert it to a sidetrack where it'll kill 1 person.
Right. The classic dilemma.
It seems like it always gets people riled up no matter where they're from.
And that's what makes the findings from this study by Yale Law School so interesting.
Okay.
It was done by the Cultural Cognition Project at Yale,
Mm-hmm.
and they gave these, like, classic moral dilemmas to people from all sorts of different cultures.
Okay.
And what they found was that even though people might explain their reasoning differently,
Yeah.
there was, like, broad agreement on which action was the morally right one.
So even if people come at it from different angles,
Yeah,
they generally arrive at the same conclusion.
pretty much. Like
Yeah.
with the trolley problem, most people, regardless of their background, they agreed that sacrificing 1 life to save 5, that was the, like, okay thing to do.
Interesting.
Even the preferred choice.
That is fascinating. It's like even when it gets really complex and emotional, there's still this like deeper shared moral instinct at play.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's not just with the trolley problem either. There have been studies on moral condemnation across cultures. You know, how people react to stuff like cheating, lying, and causing harm.
Yeah.
And they found similar patterns.
So like even with all our differences, it seems like there might be this fundamental moral core that connects us all.
That's a really interesting thought. It makes you wonder, where does this shared morality come from?
Right.
Could it be that some of these moral principles, actually evolved over time
Oh, wow.
to help early humans survive in these, like, complex social environments?
It's like we inherited this moral code from our ancestors.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild idea, right?
Totally.
Like, think about it. Early humans living in these small groups, they had to rely on each other to survive.
Yeah.
So cooperation, altruism, sense of fairness, all that stuff,
Uh-huh.
it would have been super important back then.
Right, because those who are better at like sharing and cooperating,
Yeah.
they were more likely to, survive
Right.
and pass on their genes.
Exactly. It's like survival of the, morally fittest.
Uh-huh, yeah. And you know what's interesting? It's not just humans. We see this you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours thing in other primates. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like monkeys.
Wow.
So it's possible that our moral compass goes way back, even beyond our own species.
That's amazing.
But, okay, if that's true, then how do we explain all the differences we see in morals and customs across cultures?
Right.
Like, doesn't that contradict this whole universal morality idea?
Well, that's where things get even more, nuanced.
Okay.
We have to consider the role of culture.
Right.
Like, culture definitely plays a huge part in shaping our moral beliefs. And that leads us to this idea called cultural relativism.
Cultural relativism, that's the idea that, like, morality is totally relative,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, basically.
There's no real right or wrong, just different perspectives.
That's the gist of it. And there were some big-name anthropologists who were, like, all about cultural relativism. Franz Goes, Margaret Mead, they really emphasize this idea that moral systems can be totally different from one culture to the next.
I can see that.
And they were really cautious about, like, judging other cultures based on our own standards.
Which is a good point, right? Because
Yeah.
it encourages us to be more open-minded and tolerant of other ways of life.
Exactly. It reminds us that our own way of seeing things, our own moral framework, it's just one of many.
Right.
And judging other cultures based on our values, it can be kind of, arrogant.
Yeah, for sure. But doesn't cultural relativism run into problems when we're talking about things like, I don't know, genocide or slavery? Like,
Yeah.
those just seem wrong no matter what culture you're from.
Right. That's the big challenge for cultural relativism.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile the idea of respecting cultural differences with the fact that some things just seem universally wrong?
Right.
It's a question that's been bugging philosophers and anthropologists for, forever.
Yeah. No easy answers there. So where does that leave us?
Well, on the one hand, we have this evidence for, a shared moral foundation, right? Possibly rooted in our biology and evolution. But we also have to acknowledge the huge impact of culture.
So how do we reconcile these two things? Is there, a middle ground?
That's the big question. One approach that tries to bridge this gap is called moral pluralism.
Moral pluralism, okay.
Yeah,
The capabilities approach. Wasn't that developed by Martha Nussbaum?
you got it.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. Didn't she argue that all humans should have access to, certain basic capabilities?
Yes. She says every human, no matter their culture, should have access to these core capabilities like bodily integrity, freedom of expression, and political participation.
Right.
She says these things are essential for, a life worthy of human dignity.
So it's like saying these are the building blocks
Yeah.
of a good life, and that every society should try to make sure its people have them.
Exactly. But here's the interesting part. Nussbaum doesn't say how culture should go about achieving these capabilities.
Oh, interesting.
She gets that different societies will have different ways of doing things,
Uh-huh.
different customs and approaches, which is totally fine, as long as the end result is that everyone has the chance to live a good life.
So universal goals, but with cultural variations in how we get there.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. And we actually see this in the real world,
Oh, yeah. Where?
Think about international human rights agreements, like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Okay, yeah.
That's a document endorsed by countries all over the world, right?
Right.
Representing all these different cultures and beliefs.
Yeah.
But they were all able to come together and agree on this set of fundamental rights that everyone should have.
That's a pretty amazing testament to, cross-cultural dialogue.
Yeah, totally.
Mm.
I mean, obviously getting everyone to agree on those universal rights, that probably wasn't easy.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure there were, tons of debates.
Right, and there still are, lots of disagreements and challenges. But the fact that so many nations came together to sign this thing,
Yeah.
it says a lot about, the possibility of shared values
Right.
across cultures.
Right, like a moral core we all share. Okay, this is all starting to make sense to me, but I've got to ask, how are scientists using technology to help us understand this whole thing? I'm imagining some futuristic lab where, robots are debating philosophy or something.
Well, maybe not robots debating philosophy, but it is pretty high tech.
Okay.
We're in this new era where we can use all these computational methods to look at huge amounts of data about human morality.
Wow.
It's like we're using technology to hold up a mirror to ourselves and see what patterns emerge.
That's so cool. Give me an example.
Okay, so there's this project at MIT called the Moral Machine Project.
Okay.
And they built this online platform where people from all over the world can participate in these, thought experiments.
Thought experiments. Like what?
Well, they're all about self-driving cars.
Self-driving cars. What do self-driving cars have to do with morality?
Well, imagine a self-driving car is about to get into an accident,
Okay.
and it has to make a choice.
Yeah.
Does it hit a group of pedestrians
Oh, no.
or swerve and hit a wall, potentially killing the passenger?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, right. There's no easy answer.
It's the trolley problem, but with a futuristic twist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the MIT Moral Machine Project, what they do is collect data on how people from different cultures make these choices.
I see.
And they've gotten millions of responses from people all over the world.
Wow.
So it's this huge data set on human moral intuitions.
And they're using this data to understand how different cultures deal with these ethical dilemmas.
Yeah, exactly. And what they're finding is really interesting.
What?
Well, even though there are some cultural differences, there are also some really striking similarities.
Yeah.
Across cultures, people generally prioritize saving human lives over animal lives.
Okay, yeah.
And they tend to favor sparing younger people over older people.
Interesting. So even with these super complex futuristic scenarios, we still see that shared moral core.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's like there's this fundamental human code,
Yeah.
just woven into who we are.
It's pretty mind-blowing. And it's not just the MIT project. Other researchers are doing similar things.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Like analyzing ethical texts from different cultures, looking for common themes and values.
It's like using algorithms to decipher, like, the ethical codes of humanity.
Right. This is some sci-fi stuff, but it's happening right now. Okay, this is all incredibly fascinating. But with all this talk of universal ethics, we can't forget about cultural diversity. Right? Like, the goal isn't to erase differences.
Definitely not. In fact, recognizing our shared moral foundation can actually help us appreciate those differences even more.
It's more like we're recognizing that we have, like, these common threads that connect us.
Right.
But at the same time, appreciating the unique tapestry that each culture brings.
That's such a great way to put it. It's like music.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There are these universal principles of harmony and rhythm that underlie all types of music.
Right.
But each genre has its own distinct style and flavor.
Yeah.
And it's appreciating those differences that makes exploring music so interesting.
Exactly. And it's the same with cultures, right? We can celebrate the unique ways that different cultures express those shared moral values.
Absolutely. Understanding universal ethics doesn't mean erasing cultural differences.
Yeah.
It's about, like, recognizing our shared humanity while appreciating the richness and complexity of how humans express themselves.
Okay, so as we're kind of wrapping up this deep dive, I'm wondering about the practical implications of all this.
Yeah.
Like, how can understanding universal ethics actually help us navigate this increasingly interconnected world?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
I think one of the most promising aspects is its potential to, like, improve communication and collaboration across cultures.
So it's like having this common language for talking about ethics and morality, even if our customs and traditions are different.
Exactly. It helps us find common ground and build bridges of understanding.
Right.
Like, if we can identify those shared values, it gives us a place to start, a foundation for trust and for working together to solve problems.
That's so important, especially in today's world.
Yeah, totally.
It's like, instead of getting stuck in these debates about whose values are right or wrong, we can focus on finding solutions that, uphold those ethical principles we all share.
Imagine, like, being able to say to someone from another culture, look, our customs might be different, but we both agree that harming others is wrong.
Yeah.
So how can we work together to create a better world?
It totally changes the conversation.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, like, solving global problems, right? Understanding universal ethics can also help us be more understanding and compassionate in our personal lives.
Oh, absolutely. When we realize that deep down, people from other cultures are basically striving for the same things we are.
Yeah.
To care for their families, to live in a safe and just society, to find meaning and purpose, it becomes easier to connect with them. Like, on a human level.
It's like we're all just trying to figure out this whole being human thing together.
And honestly, I think that's a really powerful message.
Yeah.
Especially in a world that feels so divided sometimes.
It is. It's a message of hope. It reminds us that even with all our differences, we're still connected by this, like, shared humanity.
And recognizing that.
Yeah.
Recognizing our shared moral core. That can make a real difference in the world.
Well, I think we've given our listener a lot to think about today.
Yeah?
It's been a pretty amazing journey exploring this whole world of universal ethics. Any final thoughts?
Just this. The search for universal ethics, it's not just some abstract philosophical thing. It's a call to action. Like, look beyond your own cultural perspective. See the shared values that connect us all as human beings.
Yeah.
And remember that each of us has a part to play in making the world a more ethical place.
That's beautifully put. So to our listener, keep exploring these ideas, keep asking those tough questions, and keep looking for those common threads that connect us all.
Because in the end, the future depends on us understanding and embracing both our shared values and what makes each of us unique.
That's a great point. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those brain gears turning.